On to the story that we're tracking, the Bollywood drug nexus being probed by the Narcotics Control Bureau is inching closer to the shark. The shark, the big suppliers who continue to poison the film industry, and the nexus goes far beyond the two. As one would imagine, the police too have been turning a blind eye to the racket. These are the revelations from an NCB insider, revelations damaging to the image of the police force too, that allow the slow poison to spread in the society.
Meet A, an informant of the Mumbai anti-narcotics cell for the past 20 years. He's responsible for many of the raids carried out by the cell, unearthing crores worth of drugs. In an exclusive interview to News18, he says drugs are openly sold in Mumbai.
सीबी के पास मैं ऐसा मैं खुलासा करना चाहता हूं कि ये ड्रग्स जो है जो पार्टियों में आफ्टर पार्टी जब होती है ये ड्रग्स आराम से यानी कोई भी गली गली कोने कोने मिल जाती है। मुंबई पुलिस आज तक ये कुछ नहीं है, सिर्फ हफ्ता खो रहे हैं यहाँ पे और कुछ नहीं है। हफ्ते मिलते हैं और खुश हो जाते हैं। काम करना होता था तो मुंबई पूरा क्लीन हो जाता था। और रही ये पार्टी की बात है, इनके जो पीआर रहते हैं, जो एक्टर लोग के पीआर रहते हैं, यही ड्रग सप्लाई करते हैं इनके।
The informant also tells us that drug use is common among film stars. Managers allegedly act as the go-between, getting in touch with suppliers. The dope is picked up by the star's driver or a member of the personal staff. The drug of choice is MDMA. He also alleges the police are aware of the drug deals, but they are under pressure not to act.
जैसा बड़े लोग का नाम आ जाता है तो उनको कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ करना पड़ता है, ये तो आप सब जानते हो, यानी पूरी दुनिया जानती है। तो बड़े लोग का नाम कभी आ ही नहीं सकता, इसके अंदर है पैसा ही उनका लगता है तो क्या कर सकते हैं, बड़े लोग का ही पैसा लगता है।
ड्रग्स मामले में जांच कर रही नारकोटिक कंट्रोल ब्यूरो की स्पेशल इन्वेस्टिगेटिव टीम उन बड़ी मछलियों तक पहुंच गई है जो दूसरे देशों से ड्रग्स मंगवाकर भारत में सप्लाई करते थे और बड़ी सेलिब्रिटी तक पहुंचाते थे। बताया जा रहा है कि इस पूरे मामले में नारकोटिक कंट्रोल ब्यूरो ने उस ड्रग्स सप्लायर का भी पता लगा लिया है जो विदेशों से ड्रग्स मंगवाकर बड़ी बड़ी हस्तियों तक पहुंचाता था।
News18 has exclusively learnt that the NCB has tracked down one of the industry's biggest drug dealers. His name is David and he's of African origin. David allegedly sources drugs from overseas and supplies it in Mumbai. One of David's associates, who goes by the name DJ, handles the distribution. The NCB is on the lookout for both of them and believe they are key to laying bare the film industry drug trade. Sources say several other dealers are also under NCB's radar. Foremost among them is Kasargod resident Jamshad Ali Malik. He was arrested last year and jailed, but is still believed to be running his business through one of his associates called Sanjay Gupta. Sources say the NCB is also on the lookout of two other associates of Jamshad Ali, Himanshu Bhai in Mumbai and Raju Bhai in Ahmedabad. All three are the biggest suppliers of charas and cocaine in Maharashtra.
सुशांत केस की जांच कर रही ईडी को जब रिया के फोन से ड्रग चैट मिले तो उसके बाद उसने पूरी जांच एनसीबी को सौंप दी। इसके बाद छोटे छोटे ड्रग सप्लायरों तक जांच की आंच पहुंची। उनके फोन से मिले सुराग और उनसे हुई पूछताछ के बाद अब इस जांच के घेरे में बड़ी बड़ी फिल्म हस्तियां फंसती नजर आ रही हैं।
Actors Deepika Padukone, Sara Ali Khan and Shraddha Kapoor have been questioned so far by the NCB. 18 arrests have been made so far, including that of former Dharma Productions employee Kshitij Prasad. Sources say the NCB has seized phones belonging to 45 people for a forensic investigation. Records of WhatsApp chats dating back to 2017 have led the NCB to several drug dealers. Sources say these phone records have led to details of drug deals and have pointed the needle of suspicion to several top stars.
Joining us on the show this evening, Abha Singh, senior lawyer, B.V. Kumar, former NCB chief, Yashovardhan Azad, former IPS officer, and AKashdeep, he's a filmmaker. Yashovardhan Azad, I want to come to you first. This is the most damaging revelation for the police because this person who is an NCB insider, informer, has called them hafta khor. How, as a person from the services, do you react to this?
Well, let me say that the menace of drugs is prevalent in all the metro cities. And apart from the Bollywood, also in schools and colleges, you know, there are these sellers outside who are inducing these people. And obviously, some of it does happen because of the because the people who are responsible to look into it turn their eyes away. So at the lower level, I do admit that they might be not looking into it very carefully, and I'm very happy that NCB has gone on the trail and is catching the big ones. And that is what is the job of the NCB, to get the big guns. And you're right that the Mumbai police should have looked into it earlier, but it failed.
Okay. B.V. Kumar, the NCB seems to be inching closer, but many questions are being raised as to why this apex agency is relying on last mile peddlers for information, the consumers, alleged consumers of the drugs for information. After all, this is the apex agency. The ambit is much larger here. They are into busting interstate drug transport, into even participating in busting international drug cartel. One would imagine that they would already have information of this kind. Why are they looking at these small fries?
No, Maha, here you must go to the genesis of the whole case. Started with Sushant Singh Rajput's investigation. Then they found money laundering is probably an offense that has been committed by some of the participants in the crime. And then they found that there was a drug angle. So they referred to the Narcotics Control Bureau. Once having received the information from the Narcotics Control Bureau, they can't ignore it. So they started the investigation from Riya Chakravarti, who named a couple of others. And that's how the investigation went on, from one actress to another actress, and so on and so forth. But then I think that led to the arrest of some of the peddlers who were the source of supply for these consumers. But then I think periodically the information was leaking out, or somehow the press was getting the sources, from which sources directly or indirectly, and to a certain extent that normally damages the investigation. Here, some amount of secrecy should have been maintained, and from the peddlers they should have gone to the source from which the drugs started coming. Now, the evidence they are gathering from these actresses, from the telephones or laptops and other things, is very valuable evidence to sort of corroborate whatever they have stated in the statements recorded during the course of investigation. But Supreme Court recently have given a decision saying that they have referred it to a larger bench of Supreme Court, whether the statements recorded under 67 of the NDPS Act, whether they are admissible in evidence or not. That's a grey area still. So they have to go for other independent corroboratory evidence by probably booking the bigger fish. Normally that should have been done.
I want to take that point,
in this case, since reference has come, they can't ignore that. Probably that is the reason why NCB is pursuing this side of the investigation.
Let me take that point, sir.
Sure
I will just request you to hold on to your thoughts there. Let me take the point of the evidence so far that has been gathered with Abha Singh. Abha, largely the case so far is based on either WhatsApp chats or confessions of these last mile drug peddlers. Some of them, as is being said by the NCB itself, are college-going students who are making some extra money on the side by peddling drugs. In a court of law, how strong or weak will these arguments be for the prosecution to establish a link between the drug menace and Bollywood?
The first thing which NCB will have to show is what is its seizure. If you are arresting someone on drug charges, whether you found drugs on him or you've done a blood test and you found that he's high on drugs. I think most of the arrests which have been made, neither has been any drugs seized from them or any alcohol or drugs found in their blood composition. So this is something which NCB will have a tough time in proving a court that these people are drug peddlers. Also, I want to know the definition of what is a drug syndicate or a drug cartel, because in Riya Chakravarti's case, all she spent was 11,000 from her credit card. And then if you're booking her under 27A of the NDPS Act, you are calling it a drug syndicate or a drug cartel. I think that also NCB will have to explain in the court, because you did not recover any drugs on her.
Yes,
so
that's
these
an
are the
important
things
point.
which on hearsay.
Right.
On hearsay, you cannot prove a case. And also one very important thing, whatever is confiscated, there are guidelines that you have to give it for testing. And only when the forensics come and the test comes, then it is a drug. I would say that maybe just white powder, which I was using. But to prove that it is a drug, the testing is a must, where in this case, it cannot be done.
Okay, AKashdeep, you know, Bollywood has been saying that they are being unfairly targeted, but the system works on a demand-supply basis. So why shouldn't those demanding bear equal, if not more, responsibility?
No, this is the case everywhere. The torchlight has come on to Bollywood, so you are seeing the muck in Bollywood, which I will not defend. But I would like to say that these people who have consumed, as is being alleged, how do you prove? How do you prove it? If somebody's had marijuana 10 days back, one day back, 10 days back, 2017 as the chats go, how are you going to prove it? Marijuana does not stay in the blood. Cocaine does. For 3 months, up to 3 months, you can get it from even a hair sample. How are you going to just prove it? Therefore, I have constantly said, why is this selective leak happening to sensationalize everything and divert the attention away from other topics? Is that so? I mean, by telling me that X, Y, Z A-lister is a drug addict, fine. If they are doing something bad, name and shame them. Are you going to get a lead of who has killed Sushant Singh Rajput because Deepika consumes drugs? Or are you trying to allege that Deepika is consuming drugs, so Deepika is involved in Sushant's murder? Okay. So these are two different things happening. Okay. And I have always maintained, why did it take a Sushant Singh Rajput for the NCB to wake up that let's clean drugs, let's clean drugs, and only in Bollywood?
Okay, AKashdeep, let me quickly point out that there are two cases here. One case pertains to the Sushant Singh Rajput death probe, and the other one pertains to the Bollywood drug nexus. But you've made a fair point on selective leak. Yes, you've made a fair point on selective leak, and I will take that with BV Kumar because he also mentioned that. So most of the leaks are happening from the NCB itself. Isn't that derailing their own case by selectively leaking information about so and so? Later, you know, there are denials also coming in that we have not given any information with regards to any actors or their initials. But
then let the
does
go to where the leak is coming from.
BV Kumar, how do you respond to that? Shouldn't this investigation be so foolproof, watertight, that no information is given out unless you reach the big supplier here, which should be the aim of the NCB?
I fully agree with you. No investigating agency worth its salt will ever leak the information or even give a press statement at the initial stage when the investigation is in progress. The whole object of the investigation is to find out who are the real culprits, not the drug addicts at this stage. And one more recent judgment I would like to point out, which has come out from the Supreme Court in January 2020, this year, is there was a seizure of 1,445 kilograms of heroin from a ship called MV Henry, which was coming towards the Gujarat coast. It was seized and by the Coast Guard and handed out to the NCB. And here the brother of the accused, the captain of the ship, was one Sujit Tiwari. Now, he was defended by before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has said a WhatsApp evidence that was found in his probably mobile phone is not good enough. And if so long they have put strict conditions and granted him bail. So that is one difficulty which the NCB will be facing.
All right.
So I would probably request the NCB that in future investigation, at least they should not give out any information to the media.
Yashovardhan Azad, the fact that the NCB is carrying out an investigation that the Mumbai police should have probably been doing, because they are looking at the consumer, the last mile peddlers over here, starting pretty much from the scratch. Do you believe then that this is because, as the Maharashtra government was indicating, this has become a political issue?
Well, obviously, there is the NCB investigation has started on a different note. I mean, it is clear that the NCB didn't start this on its own. NCB came in much later, and you rightly referenced Sushant Singh case, which is a separate case, and RIA was brought into it. But come on, how can you declare RIA a drug syndicate person? And similarly, I totally agree with Abha Singh when she says that where is the transaction which is being completed? You can't just go on WhatsApp chats. WhatsApp chats have to be supported by solid evidence. The payment, the transaction, etc., etc. And you're jumping from one WhatsApp chat to another chat. And then there are leaks, and then there are photographs drugs of various individuals. This is not the way to do investigation. So I'm totally against it. Definitely, these are small things, and Mumbai police should have looked into it. In fact, they should have handed over this to the anti-narcotics cell of the state. This is not the way to conduct investigations, and this will not even stand in court.
Also, Abha Singh, many of these chats date back to 2017. Many of them are not even recent. In that context, is the case so far looking pretty weak for the prosecution? What is your assessment as a lawyer?
Very weak. It's a very weak case because you need to have the mobiles, and that is why Deepika and Sarah's mobiles have been taken to see whether they have these chats are there and the original instrument from where they were deleted. They have to restore that. It's not so easy for NCB, and I think the NCB officers of Mumbai Bureau have been acting very irresponsibly. They are making it a ramp walk outside NCB office, and I think these heads need to roll. This is not the way NCB works. It should have caught hold of the cartels and the peddlers. And my question to NCB is, how did so much drugs come into Mumbai? What have you been doing for the last 5 years? Why could you not go to the peddlers? The NDPS Act, in fact, is very sympathetic to the small-time users. It talks of de-addiction camps. It talks of bail. It talks of bail if you put them to the hospital. And here they are trying to arrest these small-time users and leave the peddlers.
All right. I'll have to wrap up this discussion here. We've totally run out of time on this discussion, but many thanks to all four of you for getting us a perspective from various angles on this very crucial issue. Let's move on now. 32 days before the US presidential elections, Donald Trump has tested positive for COVID-19. Trump has held multiple rallies in the past few weeks where neither he wore a mask nor was the crowd observing any social distancing or masking up. So there can be only one lesson from Trump testing positive: mask up.
Shocking news from the White House overnight.
We're obviously all hoping he and the First Lady don't develop much in the way of symptoms.
President and Mrs. Trump both tweeting early Friday morning that they have tested positive for the coronavirus.
The important thing is that he is in an age group that does carry risk for severe COVID. So this is very concerning.
The announcement came just hours after Hope Hicks, one of the president's top aides, tested positive for COVID-19. White House aides have called Trump the most tested man in the country, although he has repeatedly downplayed mask wearing and social distancing.
It's obviously unsettling, but I'm not surprised given the contagiousness of this virus and what have been the lax protocols.
The number of people that could potentially be exposed and at risk of contracting this virus is significant here.
Several of the president's upcoming scheduled events have been canceled, including a rally in Florida. I'm John Lawrence reporting.
Joining me now is Dr. Isaac Bogosh, infectious disease specialist from Toronto General Hospital. Dr. Bogosh, many thanks for speaking with CNN News 18. Is the biggest lesson from President Trump's COVID infection is masking up is the only option now?
No, I really think that certainly we know that this infection can be pretty severe in some people, and we know that some people might not have as severe infections. But the point is, there's still a lot of people globally that might not appreciate the importance of this infection, and that anybody, no matter who you are or where you are, everybody is at risk of getting it. And we should all be taking precautions to ensure that we don't get this infection. We know this infection is predominantly transmitted in indoor settings where we're in close contact with others. So if we're in those settings, it's really important that we put on a mask, that we spread apart by 2 meters where it all, if at all possible, and that we keep our hands clean. Just simple, fundamental public health principles to keep us safe.
Also, Dr. Bogosh, reducing contact for President Trump may not be possible with election just a month away. How does he keep those around him safe and others like him?
Yeah, I still think it's really important, regardless of what circumstances there are, elections or other events, we've got to ensure that we are safe as individuals, that we keep other individuals safe, and that we are mindful of public safety. And that really does mean physical distancing, putting on a mask indoors, and hand sanitation. And it doesn't matter the venue. It doesn't matter if it's a presidential election. It doesn't matter if it's a grocery store. It just doesn't matter. This is what we've got to do. This is a very contagious infection. It can spread very quickly if we don't adhere to these fundamental public health principles. And in the midst of a global pandemic where we've got thousands and thousands of people dying every single day, we have to do everything we can to keep those around us safe.
Dr. Bogosh, how does having leaders like President Trump and Jair Bolsonaro, who dismiss every logical scientific solution, impact a global fight against a pandemic of this nature?
Well, certainly myself and I'm sure many other people might not share the same ideologic views as some leaders. And of course, we know that many people do share the same views. And I think it's just important that when a significant global figure who's very visible gets this infection, I don't wish ill on anybody. And even though I might not share the same views as some of these senior political leaders, I don't want them to get sick, and I don't want anyone to get sick. And I really hope everyone recovers, and I don't wish this virus on anybody. It's a terrible infection. I really think that these scenarios are opportunities for learning and opportunities for understanding, and certainly opportunities for individuals who might not be taking this virus seriously to perhaps reconsider and to really ensure that they're aware that anyone can get this infection, and there are steps that you can do to prevent yourself and others around you from getting this infection.
Absolutely. Dr. Bogosh, final question then. How much infection can be prevented simply by masking up? Are there any statistics available to help us understand to what extent does the infection rate reduce simply by wearing a mask?
It's a great question. And, it's really interesting because within the medical and scientific community, this has been debated to a pretty significant extent. But I don't think anyone would ever argue that putting on a mask isn't helpful. Of course it's helpful. What's being debated is to what extent is it helpful? But the recommendations don't change. It's clearly helpful, but there's more to preventing infection than just masks. We have to couple masks with physical distancing, with hand sanitation, with avoiding indoor crowded settings if at all possible. Masks are one of several components to keeping ourselves and those around us safe.
Dr. Isaac Bogosh, many thanks for speaking with CNN News 18. It's interesting that just before President Donald Trump announced that he had in fact tested positive for COVID-19 at that debate with his Democratic rival Joe Biden, he was mocking him for wearing a mask at all times. With that, we're taking a very quick break. News and updates will continue, so stay right there.